Hello everyone, welcome back to Planet Coaster and welcome back to our somewhat realistic park, Utopia World. I've not been in this park for a while because I've been enjoying doing the water park, but I wanted a little bit of a change and go back to a little bit more of a realistic build. However, I'm not particularly happy with what we've got so far in this western area that we've been working on. So I'm going to change things about a bit. The wooden coaster is just too big, so that's going to have to go. Well, not necessarily that it's too big, but I'm just not happy with it. I quite like the station. This was actually done before the western scenery pieces were released back into the game. So this is done with all vanilla Planet Coaster 2 pieces. So I might keep this building, but I don't think we're going to use it right now. Some of this area is pretty good. I like this stream. I'm fairly happy with the flat ride here. It's just the layout. I feel like the area is too big. We've got too big an open plaza here, and it's just not really working. I don't like these buildings either. We will keep these facades here. But the dark ride is going to get redone at some point because I've got some better ideas for it. And to be honest, it was a bit rubbish and a bit rushed. So I'm going to go back and redo that. So I think what we'll do is jump into a time lapse and see if we can condense this area down a bit and make something a bit tidier. I'm going to go for a different coaster as well. So I'll see you all over in the time lapse. Welcome into the time lapse, and the first thing that I did was remove everything I didn't want, so the wooden coaster goes straight away. It was obviously playing on my mind that I wasn't happy with that because I'd sort of deleted it as soon as I opened this park up and started playing. The restaurant and arcade building that were on this staging area sort of get removed as well, but we did keep the stage area and a few other bits that I might bring back into the area later on. There's some buildings that were that I was quite pleased with that I managed to build before the western pieces were even in the game, as I sort of mentioned before. So I felt that maybe we can bring some of them back in later, but for the time being I just want to clear some space so that I could start working on the replacement coaster for the wooden coaster. And as you can see, I'm doing a mine train instead. I didn't want anything too big. I wanted a family-friendly sort of mine train coaster. Probably manufactured by Vekoma or someone like that, and one of the more low budget ones, so no heavy theming. This isn't a Big Thunder Mountain type ride or anything like that. You would probably see this sort of coaster in a low to mid budget park, which is kind of what we're going for with this park. So some inspiration was taken from, is it El Diablo at Portaventura? Especially with the lift hill, when I end up putting some sort of structural work on it, which really improves the sort of aesthetic of the whole build. The difference is, though, this layout does not have a brake section straight after a drop followed by a lift hill, because that just seems counterintuitive. A very unusual layout that coaster has got. Had to have a few goes at getting this layout sort of correct. I wanted a good few elements where there's helixes low to the ground near the path, so there's a lot of guest interaction, which in the end worked out quite well, but I did have to dig down a little bit with the terrain to manage to get this to all work. At the moment it looks absolutely horrendous. It looks like a building site, I suppose just like it would in real life when one of these is getting built. But I do manage to blend that all in quite nicely later on. One thing I do find quite a lot is I'll build a coaster layout in this game and find that it just lacks momentum, so I think I actually turn the friction down a bit to make it get round the track without having to make the lift hill too high, because I just wanted this to be a fairly low to the ground coaster. But yeah, the layout's quite short as well, to be honest. It's crammed into quite a small space. I probably could have given myself more room, but I wanted to make this all quite compact. Also did the smoothing at the end there, and we get a layout that's reasonable. I am not the greatest coaster builder, but I'd say it's passable. You can see what it's trying to be. Might not be the smoothest ever, but I think it has some fun elements and it looks fairly good, and that's good enough for me, to be honest. I'm not going to go for ultra realism with my coaster building. Now the tricky bit here really was sorting out all the path work, because I'd left the paths in quite a state after building this coaster, so I had to sort of reimagine everything here and just fight a little bit with the pathing engine, because a lot of this was built before some of the new updates. I ended up with some bits of path that sort of had a line across them where they're connecting from one bit of path to another. I'm not sure if that's a bug or if there's anything we can do about that, but it's something that I'm going to have to find a workaround for if that's not fixed at any point. But with the new path tools, it meant that I was able to build big circle paths and stuff like that, which really helped with the layout of all this path work. And yeah, like there you can see big circle plaza, and just adds interest as well, because the guests can get right up near the coaster. Obviously we're going to fence it all off for realism later on, but for now just wanted to get the general layouts of all of this in, and you can see me sort of flying around the map here trying to work out how everything looks from different angles and sightlines and whatnot. And sorry if you heard my phone pinging there. I will put it on silent now so it doesn't happen again. Sorting out the queue line now then for the coaster. Very, very basic. But again, not a lot of room to work with, so some really tight spaces there to try and squeeze it around the coaster track. And I do end up having to raise part of this a little bit more because the clearance isn't quite enough, and there'd be a little bit of head banging on the coaster going through one of these sections, so we do go back and sort that out later. Having a bit of fun now with the recolorable rocks, and now we can do them in a nice western colour with the sort of original rocks in the game. I do kind of prefer some of the pieces, some of the actual shapes that you can get with the aquatic rocks, but it's not a compromise I'm willing to make with the seashells that are covered in them. I have used them in other areas of this park before we got, in other parts of this area before we got the recolorable rocks in the game, and they work fairly well, but you have to hide and cover up all the shell pieces, and I just couldn't be bothered to do that. So yeah, making some basic rock formations here, nothing that's too high budget. Didn't want to go crazy with it. Just my idea is that they've got a few rock pieces that they've put in just to add a little bit of theming to this ride, but without going overboard, obviously. And then same with the foliage. This could be just natural grown foliage or something that they've planted in there, but again, try to keep to a low budget with it all, not doing anything too crazy. I would say maybe this is one of the areas of the park that they've spent a little bit more money on. I sort of, in my head, plan to do an area in the park that's newer than everywhere else later on, where they've sort of got a bit more of a budget maybe. And then I also plan to have an area where everything's like really janky and like how the park would have been when it started up. But to start with, I just thought I'd do Western. I mean, like I said, I started all this before the Western pieces even come out. Just because I think it's an easy theme to do on somewhat of a budget. And yeah, anyway, a bit of rambling there, sorry about that. So moving on to what we're actually building. At this point, I'm putting in a transfer track. I kind of thought I might have to redo some of the layout when I stepped away from this and came back, because I thought we didn't have enough room for a transfer track. But for the size of the coaster, I actually managed to fit one in next to the brake run that works absolutely fine. And then I hid it from the main path so guests can't see it, and just put a little fence and gate in there, which you'll see in just a sec. What I do plan to do now going forward is to do the backstage areas at the same time as building everything else, rather than just leaving areas that I plan to come back to, because I probably never ever will end up coming back to those areas. So it's better to just do it, and so that's what I've done here. We've kept it fairly simple as well. I'm not going crazy with backstage. I'm not going ultra realism because I'm not that good at it. So I'm just going to put a few little props in there to make it somewhat believable. And then continuing on with the build, yeah, this looks like the part where I had to raise up the queue line a bit in order to have enough clearance there. And it's fine, obviously this queue line does have steps, but the exit path is a slope, so it is wheelchair accessible. And we'll probably put some signage up or something around there towards the end of this build, just to suggest that this is going to be yeah, wheelchair accessible entrance to the ride. Now playing about with the new on-ride photos that we've got, which is a really cool addition to the game. And I couldn't really think how to support the camera that well, so I just put it on a coaster support. How realistic that is, I'm not sure. I don't know if parks usually try to hide these things, but I think for this park it's absolutely fine to just do it like that. So I put it on a pole, and the camera point is just after the first drop. So you should see some hands in the air and some screaming on the photos, which is what we want. And then I just placed the two photo booths at the exit, at the bottom of the exit to the ride. Later on I will theme all that up as well, or well, probably not theme it up that much, but just put a little roof on it or something like that. Moving on to the station then, using corrugated iron roof for the roof, and I think that works out fine. And we're keeping it really simple here with just a couple of wooden posts and some lighting. And I do go back in a bit later on and add some brackets as well, just because I thought it was a little bit too basic, and whether it would actually be structurally realistic or not, I wasn't sure. So I end up enforcing it a little bit more later on. But for now, we've just got the basic shape and idea of the station, and it was a pretty quick one to build, to be honest. It is pretty much a rectangle box. Using two different roof pitches just added a little bit of interest to it, but yeah, it's meant to be a realistic station, and in a park like this you'll probably find that a lot of the coaster stations are just like this. They're just there to serve a purpose. They're not meant to look incredibly pretty, but we do keep with the theme as well, so using wooden fences and stuff like that, and keeping that sort of western feel to it. You can see that I placed a few cactus pieces around as well. Looking at that shot just then, they look absolutely huge, so I might have to look at scaling them down a little bit actually. It's funny how you sort of notice things if you content creator yourself, and you're doing the videos, and you're doing the editing and the commentary at the end. Obviously you're watching it back so you know what to talk about, and you just notice things that you don't always notice when you're actually in game. So yeah, it's kind of a good way, I guess, to look at things that could be improved in the build. I probably don't take enough time looking round at what I've built after I built it. I'm just like, build, cinematics, done, next. And then it might just get left, or later on I come back and see that stuff needs changing. But anyway, going off on a little bit of a tangent again there. Playing about a little bit with the backstage area there, just putting in a generator. And then I decided I want some mould sort of decals on the roof, just to make it look like it's a bit weathered and it's been exposed to the elements. It's quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Subtle. It's quite a subtle mould on the roof, similar to the way I use decals all around the path as well, again keeping them quite subtle, keeping them the same colours as the path, just to make it look like there's a few cracks and imperfections and stuff like that in the path itself. So I've also reworked some of the train track and stuck some decals underneath there to make it look like it's a bit weathered, and I think that's quite a cool effect as well. Kind of like the way that that's turned out. Just sorting out some of the fencing here as well, and we end up sticking in a level crossing. I actually looked on the workshop to see if I could find one of these already made, because it's the sort of thing that are usually really good on the workshop, but I couldn't find anything, so I just ended up making my own, and I just kept it to a really straightforward barrier in the end, which worked out absolutely fine. I think I kind of looked for like a traffic light type thing as well, and I couldn't even find that. I'm sure there are some on there, but I didn't really look for very long, to be honest. So I just left it at the barriers in the end, just keeping it simple, and I think that works out fine. Another fun trick that I was using was to just stick some of the decals right on the side of the path, just to make it look like certain areas are a little bit more sort of worn down from guest usage, I guess, and the weather maybe. But yeah, I think all those little touches are the sort of little bits of realism that I need to start doing a bit more in this project, rather than just building basic stuff and calling it a day. Sometimes it's easy to get into the trap of saying, oh well, it's low budget, so that'll do. But I think to give that low budget effect, you need to start doing a few little touches like that. But yeah, I think it's all in all coming together pretty nicely. Sorting out some of the fence work here as well, and sticking a little bit of rock work in just between the flat ride and the main path here, just to separate everything up a bit. And I think the next thing that I work on is the fencing for the queue line, and this actually came together surprisingly well and surprisingly easy. I thought it was going to be an absolute nightmare because of some of the sort of awkward path shapes we've got and everything, but I ended up using the sort of snap to grid thing for the pieces, and that worked out surprisingly well because it meant that I could just drag everything really easily around, and even for making the sloped one, that worked out really well because I could just move the pieces down like by 0.25, and as you can see, this is all custom, but it's meant to replicate the fence pieces that are in the station already. The reason I didn't use them is because they are upside down fences with a little bit more theming underneath, so you have to sink them into walls and stuff, which I didn't want to do with this. Obviously it's got to be tidy underneath as well because it's going to be clearly visible, so I did it all custom, and like I say, yeah, the end result of this worked out quite well. Quite pleased with that in general. I do, for some parts of this path, use just the in-game fences as well, and the reason for that really was just laziness, to be completely honest. But yeah, it worked out fine. So doing some sort of floor stamps for different numbered areas where you queue up. Different rows, I guess, would be what I'm trying to say there. There's actually 15 of them, which seems like an awful lot. I don't know if we've got a long train or it's just a long station, but yeah, another little touch of realism that I think looks quite good. And then just covering up the ugly station platform with some bits of wood to make everything look better. I need to polish off the end of the station there as well, but we'll come back to that at some point. And then I moved on to doing the Don't Die fencing, which goes all the way around the coaster. Obviously I've cut out quite a lot of footage, I'm not showing all of this because it is pretty repetitive sort of building and not the most entertaining to watch, but obviously there's a little bit of terrain work that I had to do there as well, just so that we didn't have floating fences. I did realise afterwards that it probably would have been easier just to sink the fences in a little bit, which is what I kind of do anyway, rather than making the terrain look too crazy. And then yeah, just working away around the coaster to finish all this off. So that's pretty much everything I've got recorded for the time lapse at the moment. I haven't quite finished the build. I just want to get this commentary done. So I think I'm going to build like a sign for the coaster and finish off the photo booth at the end, and probably call it a day with this build. So that's pretty much it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.